sure that these ones actually get our speaker here. On October 2nd, we're going to have Stan Baumgartner. He's going to, most of you folks, if you're from the Charleston area, probably know of Stan. His work includes, most recently, the textbook controversy exhibit that's been around. He also has a book on the postcards of Charleston from his collection that he's going to show next year. We have Dr. Bailey back there in November. He's going to do Scratch 'em and Sue 'em, post-Civil War legal issues. And I've had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Bailey about it, and it sounds very, very interesting. Also, speaking of Dr. Bailey, he's going to be here again on September 22nd. Those of you who are familiar with the Cold Wars will realize that we're approaching the 100th anniversary of the Pink Creek, Cabin Creek strike, which went on for several years. It's where Mother Jones was arrested. The Bull Moose Special, where the train drove down the tracks and was fired upon or not fired upon and shot into the miners' tents. But Dr. Bailey will be here, along with Dr. Fred Barkey and Paul Nine of the Gazette. And we're going to do that September 22nd. It's going to be about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started with that. And in the new year, I'll give him a chance to catch his breath before I completely throw him to the dogs. On January 8th, Dr. Fred Barkey has a new book on West Virginia radicals talking about socialism in West Virginia. We're going to have John Lilly talking about some of his experiences with Golden Seal. In March, we're going to have Dr. Billy Joe Paden, who's coming out with a new book on the history of Charleston. He's going back and looked at the whole history of Charleston from its founding until, I don't know when he cuts that off. On April 2nd, we're going to have Dr. Charles Ledbetter, who is going to talk about the West Virginia State College Aviation Program. Many folks don't know this little bit of West Virginia history, but there are several students that went to West Virginia State College that were Tuskegee Airmen. Several of those from West Virginia. On July 2nd, if you're booking your calendar that far in advance, we're going to have Joe Comm talk about his book on Rock Spring Park. And in September, we're going to have Dr. Bob Barnett, who's got a new book coming out called Hillside Fields, The History of Sports in West Virginia. So that should be pretty interesting to talk about. That'll be next fall. And of course, on December 4th, we're going to have our showcase again, where we bring things out from our collection. You guys can come and see them. We'll have to start talking about that around here to see what people think about it. Ready?
Yeah, okay.
You can see he wasn't prepared to speak.
Oh, boy.
But please give Jim Mitchell a round of applause. Jim is our resident expert on most things.
I'm not an expert.
Okay.
An expert is some SOB from out of town with slides. How many of you were here in January? Good. How many of you remember what I said in January? Good. Okay. This lecture was prepared about 15 seconds ago. And I wasn't really going to talk tonight. I was going to listen to Dean, who knows everything. And he's the master and I'm the apprentice. Now I might be, he's the general and I'm the private E1. You can't get any lower than that. I've been interested in glass all my life. I collected glass before I knew it any better. And when I came to West Virginia, I realized that I'd broken the American Association of Museums Ethics Act about collecting objects from the institution that you're from. My mother never taught me very well how to buy Christmas presents. So, and my dad wasn't very good at it either. And he'd say, what are we going to get her for Christmas? And I'd say, gee, I don't know. Maybe we could buy some Fostoria glass. And he said, how much money do you want? I said, $20. He said, you got it. I never even saw the $20. I didn't know what a $20 bill looked like. But they knew me at Barron Brothers, and they knew that if I came in and said I got $20 to spend, that's how much they could charge my father's charge account. So I bought Mother Fostoria American. And then I came to West Virginia and discovered that I had 61 pieces of Fostoria, which was 30 and a half more than the State Museum had. I broke the rules. I'm going to stick my neck out in a funny way. I see glass sitting around. Let's see what you got. Seeing as how I'm unprepared anyway. This one here was made by Knopf in 1963, and the 175 in it is the 175th anniversary of the city of Charleston. And it was done at the time of the centennial. Even though it's not labeled, it's Knopf. And if you ask Dean Six who the leading expert is on Knopf, you know what he's going to say? Jim Mitchell. Oops! Did I do that? Thank God. Huh? Look at this one. This is wonderful. This, well, it is. It's not wonderful. It is wonderful. This shows you how big the little inclusion is. And then you like to know who made it? Pete Gentile, not John. Pete. I think Pete. Pete tended to block his glass higher than John did. And that's John. Yeah. Did you really? We had a lady come in here one time and said, he gave us a paperweight like that. And she said, "Oh, here's a piece of John Gentile." I said, "Oh, it's Pete." "How do you tell?" I said, "Well, it's blocked like this instead of like this." Yeah, now, if you see Dean Six walk in behind me, everybody say, "Jim, shut up!" These are fun. These are pencil holders. Pencil holders. Kind of defeats the idea of a paperweight, but it's a pencil holder. And you want me to talk about this one? Window weight. Oh boy, look, there's the JG mark on the bottom. Old Glory. This is the sort of weight that you might find in the book on paperweights written about West Virginia paperweights in 1974, whose author I can't remember. Anybody know? What's the name of the lady from Pennsylvania that wrote about West Virginia paperweights in 74? 2 editions, first and second. In about 15 minutes I'll remember it, I'll tell you. But there was a lot of these illustrated in that book. What's that one there? Okay. That's a nice weight. Oh, a flattened lily. Kind of defeats the idea of the flower, doesn't it? Okay, that's that. Anybody else have anything? Stump the expert. Oh boy. I don't know. Huh?
I inherited from my aunt in Dunbar. We thought it was Dunbar glass, but I've never seen the etching.
Well, I think they did etching at Dunbar, but I don't know a lot about Dunbar glass. I know everything about Canal, but nothing about Dunbar. Okay, what else back here? Oh, here's another. Morgantown. Which factory? I don't know.
Morgantown.
Huh?
Morgantown.
Morgantown Glassware Guild. Morgantown Glass Works. Economy Tumbler. What date?
The artichoke pattern, and the president's wife looked at that one when she was picking the one she did.
And she picked the other one instead. So she rejected this nice piece of glass and picked that old dog. You heard me comment about that.
My dad was a glass blower at 15 at Van Boer's Glass Factory in Morgantown. If he were living, he'd be 112 years old.
Wow. Anybody else have anything? Okay, I've got to stop. Now, we're in the process of doing an exhibit on wheeling manufacturers for West Virginia and Independence Hall. And when I discovered that I was doing this talk, I had a cart down there already. The cart was sitting there waiting for Dean to help unload his glass. So instead I went to the hallway where I knew my glass was sitting for this exhibit. And I thought, well, I'll start with that. We'll talk about this stuff first. And there's some neat stuff here. And there's a couple of new things that we didn't know a week ago. It's an ongoing process. There are, I have a bad knee. I have a bad shoulder, which is getting better, and a bad knee, which is getting worse. And so I sit down as much as I can. Now remember, I'm not permitted to sit on the tables. I got in trouble for that last time. Nor was it 2 times ago. Where's my buddy with it? Give me the Dickens. Ogilvy Mansion Museum collects glass that was made within a radius of 6 miles of Ogilvy. And there are 5 factories. I think they did it to avoid having to deal with Fostoria. So it's just wheeling glass. However, it's not all wheeling glass. There's another factory that they missed. But they do Central, Hobbs, Hazel Atlas somewhat, and Northwood, Hobbs, and then Sweeney and Ritchie. Now I can't show you any Sweeney and Ritchie because we don't have any. That's the virtue of their collection is that they have Sweeney and Ritchie, but because there are Sweeney and Ritchie descendants in Wheeling that they received glass from. But they do Habsburg Junior. That's the place. That's right. And one of the things that shows up in the book is the so-called yacht relish dish. Now this isn't the yacht relish dish, this is the yacht salt in Daisy and Button. And we have a couple of them in our collection. We don't have the relish dish. I have a relish dish with all the big crack in the back of it. We use it for Thanksgiving and say to everybody, please be careful of the relish dish so it doesn't break again. This one, I think I've seen references to that it's Hobbs. But these V's bother me. But they made Daisy and Button, and they made it in this beautiful, beautiful color. Hobbs made wonderful colors. And then they like every other glass factory in the world, made everything they could to make a dime. Nowadays, people make everything they can to make a $10 bill. But in those days, they only wanted to make a dime. Or maybe they only wanted to make a cent. After all, a carrion boy, for a turn, got a cent and a half. A turn was 6 hours of labor. A glass gaffer got 7 cents a turn. And that was high pay for him. This is their blackberry pattern. And people are fond of saying in the glass business, opal, opalescent. But it's, and on top of it, Habsburg Junior called it blackberry pattern. Some people think they're hops flowers, kind of hard to say. And the cover's missing. This is the sugar bowl. I grabbed it because the other piece that's down there is even smaller. And this is one of their staples. They made a lot of pressed glass, and they had, they started in 1863, and they are gone by 1893. They lasted only 30 years. At the time, they were one of the premier glass factories in the United States. They made scads of glass. William Layton Sr. in 1864 invented a lime glass formula that was usable in glass press.
You don't get off the hook.
I'm doing this in mortal terror. But he appears at this table at the top. Anyway, he invented a lime glass formula. The glass up to that point was principally made of flint glass. I can demonstrate flint glass really easy because when I was furiously grabbing things a few minutes ago, even I can hear that. Oh, phooey. Well, this one's supposed to go clunk, and this one's supposed to go bing-ling-ling. This is flint, and this is lime. This is Seneca. It even says on it, Monongalia County, West Virginia Bicentennial, and it's Seneca. How many people here collect Fenton? Dick Faust back there collects Fenton. So you know what he did with this Fenton collection? He gave it to us. So Dick, what pattern is this?
Oh.
Anybody know what this pattern is? I know, I'm having fun with you all. Anybody? Huh? Spanish lace. On what? What's the main type of glass this is?
Silver Crest?
Huh?
Silver.
Silver Crest. The Spanish lace pattern on Silver Crest. Now Silver Crest is this ribbon of glass on the bottom. It's not silver, it's clear glass. For many years, Fenton was the only one who really knew how to do this. Their crestings don't appear on many people's glass, but Fenton put it on. They put clear on it, called it silver. They put amber on it, called it gold. They put aqua on it. They put green, blue, red. Any more? Purple? Purple? No, purple. But anyway, that's what it is. Now, flint glass rings, soda glass goes clunk. Soda glass, no, back up. Flint glass is blown principally. Blown with a blowpipe. All the pretty glass, Seneca. We're getting to an age that this next statement will be, some people can identify with it, but the vast majority can't. When a young lady was going to be married in the 20s, and she selected some sort of fine china, whether it be English, Wedgwood, or Spode, or Royal Worcester, or that Scottish factory Lennox. Nobody ever told me that Lennox, when I was a kid, that Lennox wasn't a Scottish factory. The name is in Scotland, only it has two N's, so I assumed Lennox was a Scottish factory. So where's Lennox located? Trenton, New Jersey. New Jersey. But in order to have stemware to match with it, to have the very best stemware, what was the best stemware available in America?
Astoria.
Come on, not Morgantown. What's the sister factory? The one the Germans had in Morgantown. Seneca. Yeah, that's kind of a neat story. In the 1890s, lots of places in West Virginia, I think in other places too, got the bright idea that if you go to the factory and you make something in the factory, you'll get the workmen to come and you can sell them building lots. Right? It's called, nowadays we call it economic development. In Morgantown's case, they built a factory, and they got a bunch of Germans in, German glass workers, and it was Seneca. And they lasted from the beginning to the end. Huntington wasn't so lucky. Huntington built a pottery. It had the Huntington China Company. It lasted about 4 years, went under. It was taken over by a guy named Harry Wiley. Grafton didn't even get to making any china before the first group went through their money. And then they sold the factory at auction, and it was purchased by 3 gentlemen, Wheeling, Slidell, Bachman, and Thomas Carr. And that's Carr China. And then that was a successful factory from 1916 until 1953. But this economic development, but Seneca is that. Seneca was wonderful, wonderful glass. And if I had within 37 seconds, I would have brought it. When we put the glass away, we're little by little moving our collections room to a collections room because we're going to put in geared carriage storage. And I've been stripping the glass out of these 2 tables and putting it where it belongs. This is what I didn't get to put away. Okay, so that's Hobbs. Then in the South Wheeling Glass Works, it was Central. This was a group of men, Esterling and somebody else started the Central Glass Company. They probably pirated the soda glass formula from Mr. Layton. But anyway, they made mountains and mountains and mountains of pressed glass. And this is their cabbage rose pattern. You put them side by side, you got to know what you're looking at, because for all intents and purposes, they're the same pattern. But this is Blackberry by Hobbs, and this is Cabbage Rose by Central. And so that's that. Central Both of these factories made a lot of glass, shipped it everywhere. They shipped it down the river by boat. They shipped it about a ton. They shipped it to Europe, all 48 states. Wait, that's not true. They shipped it to all the states. There weren't 48 states at that point. There were like 46 states, or 45 states, or 43 states, but all the states. Europe, Australia, Cuba, and South Africa. Now this we're going to do. The real surprise that happened this week was that we're going to do this exhibition, and we're going to lend West Virginia Defense Hall half of our collection of Nail City Lantern Company. You know how many pieces we own? 2. Nail City Lantern Company is very, very hard to find. Nail City Lantern Company, the books say NCL or NCLO, 1880 to 1900, maker unknown. Nobody knows what NCL means but us. We know it means Nail City Lantern Company. On the front it says Mason's patent, November 30th, 1858, which is the Mason patent date. And why would a lantern company make fruit jars? Why not? Make money. They're necessary. And they made them. In the most recent publication of the Wheeling Historical Society, Kate Quinn wrote an article, and the first sentence says, in 1877, the Nail City Lantern Company started and merged with, and later became Wheeling Stamping Company. She didn't say when the merger took place. A friend of mine did a little research last week, and we discovered that Nail City Lantern Company runs from 1877 to October 30th, 1891. They're the first people who've ever heard that those private names.
He is coming, sir.
Dean?
Yes, he'll be here in a second. Coming upstairs.
What does that mean?
You got him warmed up, Jen.
He's not here yet. He's coming, but he's not apparently coming.
Oh, he's back there somewhere. Well, I'll get out of this way and fold up my tent and silently sneak away. It's like philosophy, you got to pay for it. You didn't pay anything, you didn't get one. Which one?
I guess Dean's coming, so you made it. He waited.
Hazel Atlas. It has an HA right on the bottom of it. And Hazel Atlas was headquartered in Wheeling, but the only thing that they made in Wheeling was this. The metal tops. In the tradition of Wheeling stamping that made metal, even the glass that Wheeling stamping made, that glass was made by the West Virginia Glass Company in Martins Ferry, West Virginia. Well, you know the story about the river. The river that runs to our west, that's the West Virginia River, spelled O-H-I-O. Honest, it is. If you're down in Kentucky, it's the Kentucky River, spelled O-H-I-O. Every time some newspaper says the Ohioans are going to put a gambling casino on a barge on the river, I go up and say, and we're going to bring a torpedo boat out and sink it, because it's not their river, it's our river. The western and northern boundary of the Virginia colony was the Virginia River, spelled O-H-I-O. I guess that's it. Any questions?
Is all glass not blown?
Say again?
I say, is all glass not blown?
Is what?
Is all glass not blown?
Is all glass not
Blown.
blown? Oh, no. This is pressed. This is made in a press. It takes about, the gather comes in, gets dropped down, they fork it out, it's done. A quarter of a second. A blown piece, well, they,
Any of those pieces there blown?
Any of them blown?
oh, which is blown? This is pressed, this is blown, this is blown molded, this is pressed, this is blown molded, this is pressed, this is pressed, this is pressed, that's pressed, this is pressed.
So the little bell's the only one.
The bell, this bell, I think this bell is blown. This bell, I think was pressed. Actually, this is probably a goblet upside down. In Heathcock's books on Fenton, there are no bells before book 3. In book 2, up until 1955, if they made bells, they sure as heck didn't appear in the book. I lived those 3 books. I've always wondered why there wasn't a book 4. One, go ahead.
What was the date of Nail City? The last date, Nail City?
Which one?
That one.
This one, Nail City, 1877 to 1891. If you find these mason jars floating around, buy them. I bought 2 over the years, and I paid $65 a piece for them. And I bought them from the same guy at Fairmont, Old Nick. I bought one as a result of being at Fairmont to give a talk, and I was early, and I'm generally early, and I was about 4 hours early, so I went and found a flea market. Went to the flea market, and there was gobs of jars, and I said, has anybody ever seen an NCL? They said, ask Old Dick. So I asked Old Dick, and he sold me a jar, and then we got it. And about a couple of years ago, I went down and to an antique shop, and I found another one in his antique shop. But I got a substantial discount on that. But these are very, very hard to come by.
Are they all that shape?
No, my other one is cylindrical. It's a cylindrical point pint, and it's green. And this, it's interesting, it's green and clear. Knowing that they were making lantern globes, this color makes sense. But the other color, that's a fruit jar color. So this is the lantern globe color.
And they're all marked NCL?
The jars are, yeah. They have to, you can't tell that because the Mason's pattern is ubiquitous. It doesn't. And I don't know what, N5 on the bottom is a bold number. But NCL, they're marked NCL here. And then, actually, I said NCL is straight through without periods. This one has periods. When they have co on the end of them, they have periods. So there just are 3 marks now. Because that's the end.
Let's give Jim a round of applause.
Hey, Master, come here. Bail me out before I make a further fool of myself.
I missed all that, so it's okay.
Hello, Billy. Yeah, you can have your mic.
Into the museum in Weston.
Anything off my bird?
Just discovered so I could just park myself there and just now I feel really bad when I sell glass. I feel like I shouldn't be selling. There's just some pieces that I've sold that I thought, if I had known this was here. But you know, when you got a kid in graduate school, and I also want to know what the future is before I go giving them pieces that I know I'll never see again. So I thought I'll go up there next month and kind of quiz them and say, what plans do you have for the future of this place? When we were there,
We've got the greatest audience ever.
that, you know, the man is in the front.
They got to really redeem these.
And we left and the front window was empty and Lincoln was cold. I don't know if he was donating.
All right, $5 it is. How many folks got our e-blasts? Got it by email? Okay. How many of you saw the paper? Most of you saw it in the newspaper? Okay. If you'd like to be added to our email list, so we email things out when we have our lectures and stuff, make sure on the sign-in sheet. Put you on your way, embarrass me. Go ahead and make sure you put your email address on there, and we will add you. And as we have events, we send that information out.
loading dock, and the gentleman said, "Oh, you're here." I thought, well, I'm supposed to be here. Of course I'm here. And I said, "Are they waiting on me?" He said, "Yes, they're all upstairs." Oh, that's nice. I thought all meant he's there. I thought it was 7 o'clock. So at 6, I'm sitting very comfortably in a nice restaurant in downtown Charleston, having my dinner, thinking I have a lot of time. It's not a good beginning when you start by apologizing. I would like to apologize. I didn't know anything started at 6. My world, 5:15 is supper time, and everything else is either 7 or 7:30. Church, meetings, everything. I have handouts, but I was assured the group would not exceed maybe 30 people.
There's more than
Okay. Those would be my notes. We don't want to give them that. Then they don't have to stay. They can just get go. I think. Handout. Okay. There's the rule.
Ask a few of these.
I'm from Ritchie County. I know a few of you. My name is Dean 6. It doesn't mean anything like 5 plus 1 at all. My family's been in Ritchie County 7 generations. And I always start off by talking about glass to explain why I have an interest in glass. I grew up with a family in the 60s in a truck top camper. You remember those? And we're 3 children, of which I'm the eldest, which you will understand by the end of the evening's presentation. This is my lovely assistant, Vanna, who's also known as Millie, who did not know why she was asked to come this evening, but now she understands.
It's usual. It's the first time.
We traveled West Virginia as a family in the 60s and visited all of the state parks. Wonderful experience, very encouraging in asking us as children to think about and explore West Virginia history. When we got to the magic point when you entered 7th grade and West Virginia history was obligatory, I was really excited. I thought at last something in my elementary school that relates to my world and to me. I was wrong. We had a gold and blue history text by Conley and who the other co-author is. It's an updated of the old red textbook for West Virginia history. Blue and gold, shaped and stayed on the outside. That's exciting. You open it up, you start reading about West Virginia history, and the teacher started telling me, and the predominant story was about coal. Now, if you know West Virginia, I think it's a great big map somewhere. I'm not going to do the hold my hand up thing because that would get me in trouble. The shape of West Virginia is not flattering when you're trying to, well, you know. In my part of the world, the only coal ever in Ritchie County fell off of a Baltimore, Ohio train passing through. There is no coal. We're an oil and gas community. We have been since the 1890s and we still are. So when they start talking about mine wars, I was totally lost. When they started talking about the places, I was lost. When they got around, we'll clean it. I figure if my glasses have been dirty for 30 years, you folks can look at it dirty tonight, but apparently it's not good enough that way. I was still baffled by why the story was about coal. As the years went by, as the course went along, I began to understand it was a dominant West Virginia story, but it wasn't my story. It was as alien to the culture I grew up in, and just to the place that I grew up in, as Russian history. It just wasn't relevant to where I lived. However, my father's first job as a young man was in the glass factory. My grandmother had worked, my grandmother always worked, and there were very few jobs for women in my part of the world in the 60s. She worked in a marble factory, bagging marbles, which was a crazy job, and later in a garment factory. But the first recollection I have of her working was in a glass factory. My mother tells me she worked in that marble factory one day. Didn't like the work, didn't like the owner, and the second day, she just simply didn't go in. That's not my mother, trust me, she's very conscientious. But her glass career was short. My brother-in-law, his last name is Cease. There are 27 men in 2 generations of his family. all of them except him. 26 of the 27 worked a short time, or some of them 35 and 40 years in the glass factory. So when you talk about something that's pervasive in a culture, it wasn't coal, it was glass. So when we got to the part in my textbook where it said, potteries were once numerous in the northern panhandle. Chester was a very famous pottery center. Glass was also made in the northern part of the state. The eastern part of the state has orchards. That was it. I've gone back and read it a couple times. Now it's paraphrased, but that's very, very close. That was the part of the story that the textbook told. I was terribly disappointed. And in my 8th grade mind, what I said was, well, somebody needs to correct this. This obviously isn't a very good history book, is it? It's a very good history book. But it just wasn't relevant to what I thought the West Virginia history story was. So that led me on the path of being exceedingly interested in glass. It was fed over the years by a number of very kind people, and by the fact that in 1965, in the summer of '65, my brother, sister, and I would walk the road we lived on in rural West Virginia. Some of you can remember this. Some of you, if you can't, your children will. We'd pick up pop bottles. If you didn't grow up in West Virginia, the translation is soda bottles. We'd pick up pop bottles, and they were worth 3 cents. We got a very small allowance. Your allowance, however, you had to save. They gave you the money to teach you to not spend it. That was the reason. So you saved it until you got to buy a new ball glove, a bicycle, something that, you know, you bought something. You didn't. But the pop bottle money, 3 cents a piece. Your mother went to the grocery store. It was your mad money. Comic books were 10 cents in my day. Candy bars were 10 cents. You get where I'm going with this, don't you? All the things that I was not allowed to buy with my allowance, I could buy with pop bottle money. So we'd walk along the roads, you know, with a stick, you poke everything you found. Take about 2 hours to go a mile. You come back with a handful of pop bottles. One of them, when we took it in, they wouldn't take it. It was too old. Guess I've been lying beside the road a long time. Shortly thereafter, one of my father's friends, 1965, comes by and offers me $15. Now my little entrepreneurial eyes said instantly, it's obvious that all pop bottles are not created equal. There are 3-cent pop bottles, and there are $15 pop bottles. Now if you have a collecting bug in you, that gene, you instantly know that that's a bad thing. You're going to want 2 $15 pop bottles, then 3, and then you have to have one from every town. You know how it goes. Pop bottles may not be your thing, and maybe buttons or books or quilts or you know, golf hats, but it's the same disease. I still have that pop bottle. I did not sell it. The somewhat tragic part is, 3-cent pop bottles today are worth probably $5, the painted ones, with particular different things on them. That pop bottle is worth $15. Should have sold it maybe. But I still have it. It's a straight-sided Coca-Cola from about 1915. And it says we're from Parkersburg, West Virginia. Those 2 events, my 8th grade history book, and realizing that there were pieces of glass that were once discarded that had great value and told a story, are what got me interested in glass. There's the first half of my lecture. No, that's all. Pretty well, except for the little bag. You're good. You're very good.
You told me that box was for Jim's.
Well, Jim doesn't get everything. We take care of it. If you ever have the opportunity to travel and talk, always make sure you take someone with you. That way you can kind of have a little running narrative up front and distract everybody or something. There is a handout, which I'll get to in just a second. Let me walk down through this with you. What about time?
You're good? 7:30? You probably got
15
about an
minutes.
hour.
Okay, I promised, when they asked me to do this, I said, sure, I have no problem doing it. I'll try to cut back my normal notes. I promise to be out there by 10 or 10:30. It's cackling over here in the stacks. The normal question people ask is, why West Virginia? Why was it such a major glass house, or a place for glass houses? And you may have heard this, Jim Mitchell may have already told you this. Let me run through them quickly. It makes lots of sense once you lay it out and think about it. Number 1 is fuel. Originally, glass factories, the most intensive part of making glass is fuel. You have to have a lot of heat, you have to have sustained heat, and you ideally need inexpensive heat. In Europe, glass houses burned wood. They moved. They would burn all the wood, all the force around them, and they would go over here. And if you think our glass history is hard, imagine in Europe, part of the world today might be Czech Republic, and it's called this glass factory for 40, 50 years, named after the place. And they move it, it's the same people and the same owners, but now has a new name because it's in a new place. And then after about a half a century or less, they move it again. So you can see that would be very problematic to talk about what glass factory is it? Well, they're basically trotting around the forest, burning it down as they go, and depends on what year it is. In West Virginia, we start making glass in the northern panhandle, in what we would know today as Wellsburg. It was in Charlestown, Virginia, not yet West Virginia, and for two obvious reasons at the time. One is fuel. We were past the wood burning stage. We already figured out that it wasn't good for an industry to have to pack up everything and move every few decades. So we had switched to coal. The eastern glass factories, where the population was and where the market was, we weren't necessarily near the coal. We were. Secondly, by that early part of the 19th century, America's population was moving west. So instead of needing all the glass on the East Coast, you now needed it to start being shipped and available to the west. So Charlestown is the first glass factory in West Virginia, Wellsburg, because of fuel and because of transportation. If you make the glass, it's heavy. You can't pick it up and run with it. The other thing you couldn't do in 1815 was it was not cheaply successful to ship it by wagon over the National Road. The National Road was mud, and if it was improvable at all, they laid timber, fallen trees across it, a common name would have been a corduroy road. Think of a wooden-wheeled wagon filled with glass going across trees for several hundred miles. What do you think happens when you get to, the wild frontier around Pittsburgh or Ohio? Things you could put in the bottom of your fish tank. They didn't have fish tanks, so it didn't have much market. It was not a good thing. So making it closer to the population was a very wise thing. Fuel and transportation, the river. Right down the river in a barrel is a much safer way to transport glass than by a wagon. So we were on a river. If you think with me for a second, the Ohio River goes up a little bit, forming our state. It goes way down. If you go down far enough, you can come back up the Mississippi, right? And up all those other tributaries of the Mississippi. So as America has this manifest destiny idea of going west, you can get there from the Ohio Valley. There are some problems, but you can do it. So transportation and fuel. The other two things you need are other natural resources. Glass is 90 or 95%, depending on the formulation. Sand, silica. Just so happens we had some pretty good sand out here in the Midwest at the time, and we continue to rely upon that even to this day. The fourth element is, what's your name, ma'am? I'll pick on you. It's always Shirlette. Shirlette and Dean are going to open a glass factory. We'll call it Shirlette and Dean because I'm nice. What do you think is going to happen to us? This is year one. Shirlette and Dean, we're making glass. We've got the sand. We've got trucks, whatever we need. We've got fuel, natural gas. What do we not have? Labor. Shirlette, what do you know about making glass? She says not a whole lot. I know a fairly large amount about the history. How much do I know about making it? What you learn by watching them for days. How good is that? Do you ever see someone try to do something they've only watched and never done before? We're going to fail. So you not only have to have labor, you have to have skilled labor and some management skills. Someone who knows how to make the batch. Someone who knows how to make the clay pot. You put the whole batch into to fire it. You ever think about that? At that time, you made a big clay crucible. You stomp the mud by foot. You build it up. You put it in the fire. Do you know how to do that? I've never seen that done, so we're in big trouble. So, fuel, transportation, other natural resources, and knowledge, which is probably true of almost any business or industry. You've got to have those four. What happens that makes it successful in West Virginia is Pittsburgh becomes the western center for glass production, largely because of fuel and transportation, we just start kind of draining it off. I mean no offense by what I'm about to say, but there are two things in this culture of ours that often divide and split and divide again. One is churches. People always disagree, and then you have the upper branch Methodist and the lower branch Methodist. Or in my county, everyone's Baptist, so it's always. And glass factories. After 20 years in the business, everyone thought they could do it better. So they moved the other side of the mountain, down the river, and they opened their own glass factory. So you have a proliferation of glass in the upper Ohio Valley. Now, I'm going to talk about my definition of upper Ohio Valley. I bet you guys have people who stand right here and really talk very nicely, don't you? Are there any cartographers in the group? Seeing none, I will proceed. Well, it's either a pelican or the Eastern Panhandle, whichever you prefer. I mean it to be the Eastern Panhandle. You're very kind, but if I were to tell you that that was Morgantown, that would be where we are tonight, and that is that green place over there. I'm sorry, I spent 11 and a half years as a student in Morgantown. I am not allowed to say that. But if you draw a line from here to here, which is basically Interstate 79, and from here to here, which is basically Interstate 64, almost all of West Virginia glass production is within that 1/4 or 1/3 of our state. Why? The reasons we just had. Fuel, transportation, skilled labor. Skilled labor drifting down from Pittsburgh up here. Pittsburgh's about there, give or take. Wellsburg, Wheeling, and on down the Ohio Valley. Coal is replaced by natural gas in the 1890s. Natural gas is, fortunately, pretty dependable, much easier than hauling it out of the hillside. You lay a pipe and it's there. It creates a hotter fire, a more constant hotter fire, easier to control, and it's cleaner in burning. It doesn't have the residue that falls back into the glass and makes it discolored, which is a really big thing if you're trying to make any kind of quality control of glassware. So those are the elements. That's where they are. In 1988, I tried to go back to WVU. I did. They let me back in. So the going back was easy. But I wanted to write a doctoral dissertation on the glass industry. They were excited about that. They agreed that the history department, it needed done. There had been a few theses in West Virginia on glass, but they were done from the art department perspective, or not necessarily history. So one of the members of the history faculty said, "This is wonderful. You can talk about the Panic of 1893 and its effect on tariffs in the glass industry." Would you have come tonight if the topic was 1893 tariffs in the glass factories? Okay. Now remember that I'm not where there's coal. Although I started to edge into politics, I won't. Let's just say that with the lack of coal, unions were not an important part of my community. Farmers, independent farmers, normally are not union members. They're more worried about the cows or the lambs or the crop. So labor was not a big issue. The other man was excited. His specialty was labor. Imagine that at West Virginia State University. So he was all excited about talking about the 3 different labor unions in the glass industry. Until he mentioned it, I didn't know there were 3. Did I want to spend a couple years of my life finding that out? Probably not. It never came to fruition. That's not quite true. It became a book 21 years later. But the dissertation never happened. However, I started a database. What were the glass factories? I was given a database of about 129 factories. Someone else had done research. That seemed like a lot of factories in West Virginia, doesn't it? Did to me, did to everybody else. The more I researched, the number kept creeping up. 129 became 200. 200 became 250. 250 became 3. At this point, I'm like, wow. 3 became 350. 350 became 4. Years later, 4 became 450. And tonight, I would tell you, I won't tell you the same thing in a week from now. Tonight, I'll tell you there's about 460 hot glass factories in West Virginia since that first. My definition of hot glass factory: you have to have a fire, melt the glass to a liquid state, and then reshape it. Do I care what you're making? No. If you're in the same place, and I'm sorry, what's your name again? After Charlotte and Dean failed, remember that glass company we had a while ago? We lasted 1 year, and your name is? Bray. Bray Glass buys our site and opens up at the same location. In my count, that's 2 companies. Charlotte and Dean one, it's the same place, but Bray might make something different, hopefully has better success than push Charlotte and Dean, but that's 2 factories, it's the same shared site. Okay? If by chance you're taking glass and decorating it by cutting on it, which was a fairly big industry in parts of our state, you don't count because you're not melting glass. So we're only counting hot glass factories. Give or take 460. Okay? And in that region, the few outside there would be like Mount Tamarack. They're on their 2nd round now. They went through the Charlotte and Dean, and then they closed. Now they're in their Bray phase because they're making glass again, Tamarack, after several years of not making glass. So that would actually be 2. You know, I'm thinking about that. At this point, I'm only counting as 1 because it's still Tamarack. Anyway, you see the difficulty in the counting. It's like, well, if they come back as the same name after quitting, are they not? Tamarack down there, a few over in the Eastern Panhandle. That's about it. One in Hedgesville, which is the kind of base of the Eastern Panhandle. But all of them outside there probably would not exceed 10 of the 460. So the concentration is up in that part of the state. Are any of you from that quadrant of the state? 1, 2, 3. I saw that hand, Susan, halfway up. 4, 5. If you're from there, it's pretty hard to not have some ties to the glass factory, like coal is in the rest of the state. It may not be you, but it may go back a generation or 2. You may not be aware of it. But I would bet you that your preacher's father, your grandfather, your great uncle, somebody worked in a glass factory. Trying to go quickly. Do you have questions at this point before I keep rolling on? Anyone? It can be a dialogue, not just a monologue, if you wish. I have glass to pass. I ask you to be careful with it. But one of the things about glass is this: it breaks. I know that. I've broken more than any audience ever has broken. So don't worry about it. I mean, don't try to. You don't have to do that. The first piece I'm going to pass is probably from Sweeney, and the Sweeney firm was in Wheeling, and it has a long history and about 9 or 10 different names. It's Sweeney and Bell, Sweeney and Company, Timothy Sweeney, Timothy Sweeney and Sons, Sons without Timothy. Last one I made up. This is a style of the early 1800s, very thick lead glass, big wide panels, cut by holding it against the turning wheel. Wonderful form, classic shape, looks very much like something out of Europe at the same time. The very first factory, as we've already alluded to, was 1813 in Wellsburg. So next year is the 200th anniversary of glass production in West Virginia. So we have some schemes afoot, we meaning the Glass Museum of Western West Virginia, to kind of ask the whole state to join us in the celebration of 200 years. This picture is Sweeney, 1840, 1850, from Wheeling is what I'm going to tell you it is. It's hard to say for sure. There are no catalogs of the time period, no illustrations. The only way to document a piece is provenance or similarities to pieces with provenance that ascended the Sweeney family, and yours looks like that, so it's probably Sweeney. So I'm cautiously telling you it's Sweeney by attribution, not by fact. Okay? Talk briefly about the 3 divisions of the glass industry before I start passing more. The glass industry is a strange thing because we think of glasses all together, but they did not, and they do not. And it's those same divisions. One would be flat glass, which is window glass, and glass for architectural purposes, and there's some other adaptations of flat glass, but largely windows and architecture, okay? Those guys have their own union, their own processes. Generally, they have their own trade publications. They don't talk to the other glass people. They may as well be talking wood and plastic. They're both the same idea, but entirely different. That industry today is heavily robotic. It was a big part of the story in the Kanawha Valley and Clarksburg, West Virginia. A few others, but those are the two center concentrations, Kanawha Valley and Clarksburg, okay?
Does that include Libby Owens?
Yes, Libby Owens, big flat glass. They're the guys who come and mechanize it. It starts off with smaller, usually Belgian cooperatives. I think you know the book of Cinderhead in the Hills. It's about the hand window glass workers in the Kanawha Valley. Hollowware. I love doing this. Once a year I go back to WVU and get to guest lecture from the honors program. We're senior history students in the honors program. The best and the brightest. And some pretty strange kids too. But wonderful young people. And I say Hollowware, and they get a blank look. I'm thinking, you should be able to figure out what that means. And I say beer bottles. And all of a sudden they all light up. It's like, okay, I should have started with that. Over the years I've decided I always start with Hollowware. Hollowware would be a container. This would be a more recent one, this would be an ancient one. And this is a diversion if there ever was. In western Pennsylvania, western Virginia, in the 1800s, what was the most dominant crop? Corn. If I had planted him back there, it couldn't have been better. Corn. And where do you sell your corn? West. How do you get it west? On the boat. Same one that's carrying the bottles and the glass and the window glass. What happens when you put corn on a boat in 1840? It's wet. What happens to wet corn? Ferments. Who eats it? Not you, rats. What happens to your corn crop? It gets to Cincinnati. They try to sell it. It doesn't sell. Rotten. Infested. Terrible. So how do you sell your corn? I love these stories, not because of the punchy little things you get to tell, because you can talk about the entire big story of American history in one object, and my object is glass. You can talk for hours about what this means. But why do we drink so much whiskey? Whiskey consumption per person in 1830 or 40 was insanely high. Was everyone alcoholic? I'd like to think not. But the water was terrible. Terrible. If you lived in Charleston, New Wells, if you had one, it was probably contaminated. Do you want to drink out of the Kanawha at that time? It wasn't dammed, it was low. Half the year it was full of well, and the other half of the year it wasn't there at all. It was dried up. So what did you put into most water if you could? Something to flavor. Something to maybe even kill a few germs along the way. So exceedingly large amount of nipping going on. And when you're nipping, you send the whiskey away and you don't ship it this. But this is the point of distribution. This is the Starbucks coffee cup of the day. And they say great things. Here are the wrong audience. I need some college students again. I always look around and have a few T-shirts in the group. What does your shirt say, sir? Lumos Networks. And man, what does yours have on it? Flowers. You guys don't even have a vacation T-shirt. So I was at the beach right now. Jim's almost counts, yeah. These flasks are called historical flasks. They are the T-shirt of the 1840s. Every slogan that today might appear on a T-shirt, my favorite would say, "Success to the railroad." And it has a horse-drawn railroad cart. That's what the railroad started out at. It needed a lot of wishes for success. This one says, "For Pike's Peak." How long is that a popular phrase? About 4 or 5 years. Very late 1850s, maybe the Civil War disruption. Past this one, why don't you look carefully when this one comes to you? One side says Pike's Peak with the little guy walking with the stick we think of as a hobo. You know what hobos are today? We don't have that word anymore, do we? Yeah. On the flip side is the American Eagle, for the Union, for America, the American system. And underneath it's a little cartouche, fancy word for flat and circle. In the cartouche is the word Cerrito. I love this story. It took 10 years of my life to convince the bottle world that Cerrito is there because it's a town in West Virginia. What in the world else is called Cerrito? And I still wouldn't accept that. It took trips to the to Richmond, to the Virginia archives. It took reading 1810, 1820, 1830, 1840s, 1850s newspapers. Finally, all the pieces came together. I wrote a story that got published in one of the journals for the serious bottle guys, and they finally all said, "Oh yeah." What else could you? I mean, think about that. I know it sounds impossible. What else could possibly be Cerrito? Great story. Some men come down from New England, down the Ohio River, clear down to Cerrito, thinking that the river wasn't dammed at the time. It dried up. You couldn't ship your products west. If they were further down the river was bigger. They had a longer season. They could beat out the guys in Wheeling, Wellsburg, and Pittsburgh by being further down the river. Great idea. Good sand down there in Cerrito, coming out onto the edge of the Ohio. They had sand. Enough gas, I guess they were getting away with it. However, what they didn't count on was the American Civil War. And the fact that they were in the South. And they were Yankees. So by 1859, they were having some problems with locals. By 1861, they tore down the factory, brought it, and chased those rebels. The rebels had chased those Yankees back north. So about a 4-year history. So Cerrito glass did this for about 4 years. What else did they make? Probably something besides this one little historical flask. But because it says Cerrito on it, it's the only thing we can actually point to and say it's made there. Pretty cool story. 1859, 1861, not beyond that. Early example, hollowware. That was our hollowware example. And the third division, so we have flat glass, hollowware, and table and novelties. Easiest of the three, isn't it? Glasses are putting on the tables even as I speak. I like that. Tableware and novelties would include the obvious things and maybe not so obvious things. You know, novelty, tableware. Pretty obvious, isn't it? Big part of the industry, entirely different from the others. That's the American Flint Glass Workers Union, whereas the glass people are called the Window Glass and Cutters League, not union, league, and then the bottle people called Bottle Blowers Union, American Bottle Blowers Union. 3 distinct unions. Okay, I'm going to pause. You know, I won't feel the least bit bad if you need to. This is the part where in church we sing the hymn. And everybody, well, some of us are standing, the rest of us sneak out. It's okay. I'm going to go across to objects now. That's my kind of overview on history. And I'm going to tell it from here on out just with objects. Are you ready? If I've been really smart and been here at 5 or 6, arrange them chronologically. This is my example to pass for you of glass, of flat glass. This is wire glass. You remember this. I cannot say that to those WV students. Because I say, you remember this? And they all say, safety glass, as it was known in our time. It has chicken wire in it. Laminated actually into the glass. Pretty cool product. This is a salesman's sample. The edges have been ground and buffed, so you can't cut yourself. Go into a little wooden box, so they can pull it out and show you the different kinds. This was made by Mississippi Wire Glass Company. Ingenious name if you want to make glass with wiring. Mississippi Wire Glass Company from their factory in Morgantown, West Virginia. Massive store. Think about this. Every public school, every public building, that's the kind of glass with all the doors and many of the windows. Factories, industrial sites, so tons of it. So that's our nod to the window glass and flat glass industry.
What year?
What year is Mississippi Wire Glass?
Daddy, can I have this for Christmas?
I'll shoot.
There's a book written by some little round guy who doesn't have much hair. It tells us that. Morgantown, Mississippi Wire Glass. Mississippi Wire Glass pre-exists the Morgantown factory and survives after the Morgantown factory. They had about 12 factories across the country, thus the name Mississippi Wire Glass. But the main one and the one that made the wire glass of this type would have been Morgantown.
1902 is sort of 1930s.
It's there from 02 to 37. And we don't know when it closes. We say it's circa 37. I think late 30s it's gone, whether it's 37 or 38 or 39. Not real sure, okay? Very practical. Let's stick with the practical stuff. A big part of the industry is lighting. I don't see much of a cover on these lights. But if you think about it over the years, how many ceiling light fixtures, how many kinds of light fixtures have there been? Not thousands, Tens of thousands. How many kerosene lamps were there? This is a night lamp for, a child's night lamp, or this is the little plug-in in the hallway equivalent from about 1910. This one was made by Hobbs Glass, Optical-Cunier in Wheeling. It had a very plain little chimney. And if you want to talk about something that burns kerosene, I'll talk about something that was made by the billions in the glass industry. It's lamp chimneys. Did any of you grow up with lamp chimneys in practical use in your homes? Yeah, I shouldn't ask that. My father did. Electricity didn't come into my community until the 1940s. So he was a young man, he had lamp chimneys. The job was to clean the lamp chimney. The soot, the carbon black gets inside the lamp chimney. They're thin, and they break. And the guys who made them didn't do a whole lot to make it otherwise, because you sold them in the 30s. In the 1940s, Dunbar Flint Glass in Dunbar, West Virginia was shipping several 100,000 dozen to Africa as part of the World War II effort. 100,000 of dozens. That's a lot of lamp chimneys. They did not have electricity. The Allies were winning over the hearts of Africa, or trying to at that time, and that's where we were shipping hundreds of thousands of these things. So we made them in West Virginia by the millions. Let me do the rest of hollowware. I'm going to give you one this time instead of starting everything over there. I have two more pieces of hollowware. This one is not going to be. I could talk to you until midnight about this one little jar and its cousins. At which point I probably would be just as wise to talk to you about the Panic of 1893. This jar is modeled after one made for a particular company in Wheeling. Do any of you know Wheeling well? Center Market downtown, the old part of town. As you face Center Market, on the riverside is a three-story building. At the top of that building, the point where it's always the most beautiful and nobody ever looks at, it says Flaccus Brothers. Flaccus Brothers was a major competitor for Heinz. Unfortunately, for us in West Virginia, Heinz won. Flaccus was a big contender early on. Why? Because they made the best product? No. Because they were both in cities that could make them a sanitary container. It's not because their ketchup was better, it's because they could package it and ship it better. This was one of the competitors. This is not a Flaccus, it's very similar. This one actually was from McMecken, West Virginia. You know where McMecken is? Well, you guys are good. So this is from McMecken, but it looks very similar. Kind of like today, that all of our cars look like everybody else's Mercedes. They're just sort of the same shape. This is trying to look like the Flaccus because it was perceived to be one of the better leaders. The top is rough and ground because they made them as quickly as they could. They blew it, broke it off, and just ground it and sent it off. This is much later. I love this bottle. Me and about 3 people in the world probably do. This was a 1 liter, I think, throwaway soda bottle. Remember when the glass ones were still, they weren't depositing, we're past the deposit stage, not yet to the plastic stage. These things were not around for a long time. I don't know how many years, 8, 10, something like that. But on the side of it, it says, glasses up, Chattanooga Glass Company, first bottle run on July 10th, 1972, Kaiser WVA. So to commemorate that, these guys are very proud of the fact that they're making this big bottle. They carved it into the mold and made a bunch of them give out. Probably the Chamber of Commerce was there, the newspaper. You know how this is. Not a priceless bottle at all. But from a West Virginia collector standpoint, or telling the story, that's one of the companies in Kaiser that's outside of where the normal glass building is. Chattanooga Glass, obviously, originally started in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Yes. Yes, I'm heading that way. This one's a nod to Jim Mitchell. I looked to make sure I had one of these in my pile. Yes, Fairmont Green, he says. Owens, Illinois. Looking at how much glass I have, how much time I have, and how fast I must speak. And I didn't bring as much as I wanted. Owens, Illinois becomes a major, and today is yet a major world leader in containers. Because the guy from Wheeling, West Virginia, the guy from Wheeling, born in, what county is Point Pleasant? Mason, thank you. I should ask you. Mason County, a boy born in Mason County, grew up in Wheeling, was an absolute genius at inventing things. His name was Mike Owens, the Owens of Owens, Illinois. That's why we had all the Owens plants in West Virginia. Mike was a West Virginian. He kept, against the board of directors, it's a great story, they would always say, let's build a plant someplace else. And he would drag them back to West Virginia. You know, he would be stubborn. The great stories of him throwing fits because they weren't going to build it in West Virginia. Or him just coming down here and starting to build it. And then telling them, I mean, just a wonderful, can't imagine West Virginia being that obstinate, right? Look how little this soda bottle is. Who has the big one now? Where's, now, would you hold that up? That's a 1972 soda, and this is about a 1930 soda. And that isn't even supersized. They get bigger as years go by. This has an Owens note on the bottom, and number 3. Plant number 3 is the plant in Fairmont, West Virginia, and they were specialists in making this green. I love this bottle. It probably holds about 3 sips. But at that time, 3 sips of soda, sugar, carbonation, flavoring was enough. Okay? I think that's all my hollowware. Questions on the whole idea of bottles or window glass? Because we're going to move on to novelties and tableware, the part that most people get excited about. Anyone? If, as things are being, yes?
I just said a couple of times you've mentioned hob glass, and he's mentioned hob glass. Is it marked? I noticed that this piece was not marked. Does it have a mark?
Which one?
Hob glass?
Hobbs? No.
Hobbs?
Hobbs, H-O-B-B-S, was a big glass producer in Wheeling. Made our nicest Victorian art glass in West Virginia, the fancy high-end stuff. They were the only real producer of that in our state, and it is never marked.
It's never marked.
I can't think of a single piece of Hobbs as any mark or trademark. I didn't bring these. Usually when I do glass lectures, I have 2 little toy cars I stole from my best friend's 12-year-old twins. They'd outgrown them, I got permission. One's a Volkswagen Beetle. The other is a little sports car of some kind. I hold them up to a group. Are you guys necessarily car buffs? No, probably not. You know the Beetle? Yes. What do you know the other one is? You know it's a sports car. You may not know it's a BMW, whatever it is, but you know. Why? You learned a visual language. I drive down the highway with my nephew sitting beside me in the seat. And I'm going 70 miles an hour. That car's going 70 miles that way. He goes, Uncle Dean, did you see that Saab 215 TXZ? The red car? But he has learned, and he's not a car guy, he has learned that visual language. All this goes back to your question about Hobbs, man. How do you know it's a piece of Hobbs? Just like he knows that's a Saab 2006Z. It's a visual language. It's a combination of color, form, a little education. And you do learn.
Are there publications just on Hobbs?
There's one book just on Hobbs, out of print, but still available. And a wonderful book, wonderful book. I think the people who are wonderful, therefore I'm going to tell you it's a wonderful book. I'll do these next. I'll do this one. This is a piece of Central Glass, which was the other big company in Wheeling, West Virginia. It just so happens to commemorate the American Centennial, 1876. In Wheeling, the glass workers were German. What do you think that means? Beer, steins, tons of them. Wheeling, at the turn of the last century, had 3 newspapers still written in the old German. What's it called? The old letters, the old way of German?
Fraktur.
Fraktur, yeah, something like that. I'm sure I butchered that. So you have a big German population if you support 3 papers in German, right? Tons of beer merchants. Yes, Jim. They had summer beer mugs, Weiss beer mugs, ladies beer mugs, Pilsners, endless varieties. So it makes sense of the stars around the middle in 1876. I've been told repeatedly this couldn't be a man's beer mug, it doesn't hold enough. I'm not going to get into that, but it is a reasonably small one made for the American Centennial in 1876 by Central Glass in Wheeling, Virginia. Wheeling, Virginia. About 20 years later, it was West Virginia by that time. I'm coming down the line on drinkware. That's a chronology. This is another piece of Hobbs, very typical water goblet. Again, what do you drink water out of at home today? Man? Plastic? If you tell me glass, I love you. But you are not the average, you're not the norm right now. Go to Walmart, go back in the houseware section, try to find a glass. A glass is now plastic. It usually holds about 26 ounces or 38 ounces, and it's some bright neon color, and says dishwasher safe, microwave safe. Water glass from 1980, there's a little etching one called Flamingo Habitat. Victorian, we were wanting to do things that are exotic. Who had seen a flamingo in the 1880s? Not many people. The flamingo looks a little bit like a heron to me, but it's called Flamingo Habitat. Hobbs broke cuneer, everyday tableware, and the type of stuff that would have been sold to the emerging middle class. These two I love, they tell great stories. I look at that, I'm getting a little nervous. Not lead glass, soda lime, less lead content, much cheaper, faster to produce formula. This one has a little fairy, a nymph, a sprite, winged creature, swinging in a circle. This has two griffins facing each other. Both these patterns are produced by Central Glass in Wheeling, starting about 1917, 1819. And they have names, but they get renamed by somebody who's doing marketing. I tend to think of marketing as being a 20th century, mid-20th century thing almost. No. This becomes Morgan, because the set is given to Governor Morgan. This becomes Harding, because the set is given to President Harding. Both say they used them in their private quarters. They never became the official crystal of the White House. Mrs. Harding writes back a note thanking Central for it. Some of this still existed in, you have the Morgan that used to be in, you have some of the Morgan that used to be in the governor's mansion.
It's all of that case still.
It's still in the mansion. It wasn't for years. They've gathered it up and put it back. But both made there. I'm not going to comment on why our state got the little fairy and the president got the big, more masculine griffin. But there they are. They're both very typical 19-teens, 20s decorations. So the griffins are Harding, and the decorations come interchangeable. Very quickly again, hold on to your seats. The decoration is called plate etching. And it's done just like an art print. You know the cliche that was such a bad joke in the 60s, you want to come up and see my etchings? I can say that all the time because I have hundreds of pieces like this. You take a metal plate, you carve the original design into it, you cover it with wax, you put a thin piece of tissue on it, you rub it with a hot sponge, you peel it off. Now, the wax is here with a negative image of what was carved into the plate. You wrap the tissue paper around the object, rub it with a hot sponge. Yes, labor intensive. Peel it off. Now, the wax is on the glass, covering all of it except where the original design was carved down into the metal plate. Are you confused? It took me 10 years to figure this out, so I hope you are. Otherwise, I'm going to feel really bad. Dip it in acid for about 14 seconds, give or take, depending on the concentration of the acid and how deeply you want to etch into the glass. Pull it out, wash the acid off, which is one of my favorite things in the world because they wash it in a big vat of warm, sudsy water with lots of citrus in it. It smells like bananas when you go there. It doesn't smell like acid, it smells like bananas and fruit. Then you have to dry it off, handle it about 14 times. So it's a very expensive process. What makes it important is when you have a master artist make that original metal plate, and then a common laborer can replicate it time after time after time after time, versus learning to be an expert glass cutter or a painter. So you can get a great design repeatedly perfect by using plate etching. And each one technically is a little piece of art etched onto a glass. Think of them as mini West Virginia Rembrandts, sort of. Best glass company in West Virginia, in my opinion, and it is only that. Others would dispute, and they have the right to. These are two examples of what I believe to be our best company. It's Seneca Glass. Would you be kind enough, one of you, to take those two and give me just a little bowl of tap? You can do it together, just bowl against bowl. Hear that? Soda lime. Lead crystal. Why? Why is it lead crystal? it has lead in it, which makes the glass softer, easier to cut. It makes the glass more reflective of the light once it is cut, more like a diamond or a prism. And it is overall heavier, which people have with time. The Waterford folks have certainly enhanced this idea. The answer for contemporary Waterford is, if it weighs 5 pounds or more, it's really good. So they make the biggest, heaviest glasses you can imagine. This glass is superior to anything Waterford's ever thought of. Each one is master cut. These took up to 14 hours per goblet to cut. Were they expensive in their day? Yes. Did anybody in West Virginia own a set of these made in West Virginia glasses? Not many of us. Not many. These are probably from the 30s or 40s. 2 examples. They both have air traps in the stem, which is another very elaborate. The stems are cut and faceted. Water goblets, semi-glass, Morgantown, West Virginia, 1930s and 40s.
Who did they market to?
Who did they market to? It was the last hand-cut lead crystal sold by Tiffin. Last hand-cut American lead crystal sold by Tiffin. Who did they market to? High-end jewelry stores. Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, any place big. Dallas, West Coast. And there were people in West Virginia who had it, assuredly. But I don't know about you guys. These were probably $10 a stem when they were made in the 1940s. My family in the 1940s, $10 would have been the value of everything in the kitchen, every utensil. It just wasn't possible as a rural working family. We did not have any sentiment. Now I have hundreds of pieces. I made up for that. Tell me again my time. I was supposed to be done 3 minutes ago.
You got about 15 minutes.
I can do it. I have 15 pieces.
We'll have to make these guys run out, but I'm going to do that.
I will be punctual. But then I'll linger if you want to linger with me. Hazel Atlas, one of the biggest probably the biggest West Virginia-based glass company. In 1929, on the eve of the Depression, I'm sorry for turning my back on you so often. On the eve of the Depression, in 1929, they boasted they had made 1 billion pieces of glass in the prior year. Not million, billion. They got up to 16 factories. They were always headquartered in Wheeling, West Virginia. They never made a piece of glass in Wheeling. Never. They had a company there that made lids and closures, and the corporate headquarters were there. The building is still there. The corporate offices are still there. It was the home of Northern West Virginia Community College until recently. You can tell this is my piece of glass. It has vintage dust and maybe a bug or two in the bottom of it. Please forgive my dust. It's just the way I just don't have the time or the interest in cleaning. Okay, this one's got to be really fast. In the 1960s, some of you may remember when John and Jacqueline Kennedy came to West Virginia, what an impact it made on our state. We probably received as much attention during that election from the national campaigns we ever have. There are many photographs of the Kennedys traveling West Virginia. They went to Morgantown and they toured the glass factories. After they were elected, Mrs. Kennedy chose West Virginia glass to be the official glass in the White House. Big thing. And her response was, openly, that this was a thank you to the people of West Virginia, because our electoral vote was small, but significant in that close race. You could not call this the White House glass. There's a rule against that. You can't. However, it became marketed as President's House. This line, they made it before, she saw it, she liked it, they renamed it. It sold by the zillion. That's more than a billion, by the way. And the problem is, once the label's off of it, it looks like every other hand-blown glass piece made in 50 factories, and that would be Seneca.
This was her other choice.
Artichoke?
The artichoke glass.
I like that. I didn't know she almost chose that. This is the one I do.
I have.
Made next door to Seneca, and this is Morgantown Crystal made right next door. Last night on the table work, I'm away. I don't want to not talk about decorating companies. This is from West Virginia Glass, West Virginia Glass Specialty in Weston. We decorated so much glass in our state. We didn't just make it, we did the value added. As a plain glass tumbler, it's worth a few pennies. But if you decorate it, it's worth more. In this case, we have 2 stencils that add blue. Hurrying too much, Dean. Green and red for holly. Then they had a wild machine that they discovered by accident. The nozzle on one of their spray paint machines got clogged one day and spit out blobs. Somebody who was the designer said, I like that. It becomes snowy holly. And it was a very popular, the diamond sold. for many years. My mother received a piece of this as a gift by 1967, and she valued it highly. As a child, we were threatened, don't go near that piece of snowy hollow. I didn't know what it meant, but we weren't supposed to touch it. Snowy hollow. The West Virginia piece. The pressure's on. That's a demitasse, also known as an after-dinner coffee, made in by Fostoria Glass in Moundsville, West Virginia, one of our bigger and most known glass companies. In 1934, 6, 7, did anybody in here have a family that drank out of a demitasse? I don't mean to be playing class war here at all.
Oh, there's somebody.
Did you use it? Well, at least you had it. I try to imagine this in my grandmother's little china cat, little bird glass one. No way. We made thousands of these, sold all over America and the world, but not to ourselves. This is Fostoria. Fairfax, I think, is the blank. It was often decorated. This would be what today we would call elegant glass or elegant depression, light pastel color, but a special little dinky coffee cup. My family would have said, where's the rest of it? That's where we sold it. People don't know it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, Jim, you may not have those options.
Which one got it?
Any, these are remix.
Just find me another one.
I don't want you to forget that we do make and have made art glass in West Virginia. I bought this in 1976 from two brothers who moved here from outside the state to be artists. They're living outside of Hedgesville. That's one of my glass factories outside of the realm. They call themselves Amingo Glass. They did this about 3 or 4 years, then they quit making glass like this. They still produce today, but they make stained glass. Excuse me, technically I think they make leaded glass. They don't stain it, they cut it, and it's similar with lead. They say stained glass, I say lead. They're still in the glass business, but they haven't made hot glass for some time. I bought this from them, and it's called Prototype for a Rhinoceros. In 1976, I think over in Hedgesville, well, they were artists, right? That's all I have to say. I love the piece. I had never understood it. You remember them down near Week? They're still around. I called them and said, what, you start making glass? They didn't know. So you stop making glass? They didn't know. Marbles. Marbles are one of my favorites. What have we made? Okay, let's do the marble story. In the whole world, there have been, it's hard to answer this now because we don't know exactly what's happening in China. Let's tell you that in the whole world, forever, there have been 32 marble factories. Of the 32, 27 of them have been in America. Of the 27, 21 have been in West Virginia. Of the 21, 14 have been in my home county. Out of the 14, 3 were in my little hometown of Cairo. One of them was where my grandmother worked bagging marbles. 3, that's 10% of the world's population for marble factories were in Cairo. Population today, about 280 people. We still have 3 of the hot glass producers in West Virginia in Ritchie County. And what are they making? Only marbles. Not the ones that are sold to children. That market is left only in 2 factories in the United States, one in West Virginia, one not. This is an Eddie Cease. Eddie's 34, 6 years old, something like that. Started his glass at Mid-Atlantic. Remember that Cease name a while ago with my brother-in-law? Eddie will be a cousin. He's one of those young men in that family who can't get away from glass. He worked from Mid-Atlantic, then he moved to Fenton. Now he has his own little one-man studio. This is his, I don't know, he has a name for these. He makes them and rotates the axis and rotates them again. He's the first one to do them. It's called something like a trihexyl dexyl core twist. I don't know. He has some really clever name, which makes them much more expensive. Eddie Cease, S-E-E-S-E. Moundsville, Fostoria Glass in Moundsville. He asked about the demitasse. Marbles are a great wonder. This is a nod to paperweights, which a couple of you have on the counters. We've made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paperweights in the factories. Originally, they were not considered production. You made them at lunch or when you're off time. You gave them as gifts. At some point, a couple of factories realized they could have their guys make them, sell them in a factory store in most cases, they were never production. This says JB on the back half, stands for Jennings Bonnell, a man who made glass 47 years, almost 50 years of production. Jim wrote a nice story about Jennings in Golden Seal some time ago. This is supposed to be an oil well that Jennings made for me some time ago. Typical in every way. First gather a blue glass, picked up a powdered glass to use the pattern, and encasing it clear. The last thing he does is he stamps his initials on the back. Fenton. Don't talk much about Fenton. We lost it last year. Turned off the furnaces a little over a year ago. Still in discussion about what's going to become of them. We hope they continue. They're making glass beads now, which is not hot glass. You use little rods of glass and a Bunsen burner and shape them that way. So that does not qualify in my world. This is a piece of their art glass stamped by their master artist. Has a control bubble in it, a hanging heart, artist's mark on the bottom. Their hands are full, so I'll go this way. I want to talk briefly about what happens after mid-century. We go into crazy stuff. This is not the craziest I have at all. We start using colors like steel and smoke. This is a color from the 50s and 60s. Starting in the 50s, in the 70s, we do these industrial colors. Steel and smoke. Slant top to make it look different. Same face was made for 50 years, the flat top. Change the top a little bit, and off we go. Last piece I'll talk about, and then I'll try to breathe and let you ask questions. This is a piece made of Pilgrim, carved, designed by and carved by Kelsey Murphy. I think Kelsey Murphy is the, careful what I say, probably the leading glass artist for our state in the last 100 years, and perhaps one of the very best in America at the turn of this last century. She's a Rhode Island School of Design graduate. She came here to work at Pilgrim and has now been in West Virginia for about 30 years. Yeah, 30-some years. Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y. She does the work. Her farm is into the dirt road. That's how you know she's West Virginia now. Into the dirt road in Wayne County where she carves the glass. She struggles to find blanks to work from. It's exceedingly complicated to make the glass consistently thin, so when you carve it, it doesn't blow away or disappear, and then to have the whole vessel not heavy at the bottom. It's just an accomplishment of glass crafting and artistry. And those are her horses, which run around all around her house. Dwayne was one of Kelsey's carver when he was at, and we like Dwayne a lot. Dwayne worked at Pilgrim as one of the 5, 7, 8, I don't know how many were carved. And there are a legacy of probably 4 or 5 carvers now around West Virginia who are carving because they learned it at Pilgrim. I have handouts. We publish a magazine, the Glass Museum. I saw that. The brand new Golden Seal has Kelsey's artwork on the cover, and a story about her inside. And there's a plug about the museum in Weston, if you like that. Copies of the Glass Magazine published by the museum in Weston. If you are interested in glass further, I very much encourage you to take the 101-mile trip up the road. The little green. This is a planter from Akro-Agate being close to West Virginia. I have a few pieces I didn't show. You want to keep those around? We're going to pass around a bag of marbles. These were made by Champion Agate in Greensboro, West Virginia, to commemorate the American bicentennial. So they got a little bit of age. Take one. Let them pick their own. It's more fun. I take a bowl of these to glass shows and put them out, and I say free. One piece of glass, very small. People spend 20 minutes looking through that bowl to pick the marble they want. Here's the last part of the marble. If you will put it in your left pocket, we guarantee it to bring you good luck. If by chance it fails you, bring it to Weston. Go into the museum and tell whoever's working that you got a faulty one and you want to trade it or you want your money back. I promise you they will honor that request. We have people who come in and say, I got this 3 years ago at a show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and my luck is rotten, I want another marble. And the first time that happened, I hadn't forewarned the lady who works in the museum, and she called me up and said, why what in the world is going on? Some man's here to trade mark. People always remember, left pocket and it's guaranteed. I do have a few other objects I'm glad to talk about later. I do write glass books, so I don't want talking about them. My most recent is this. It's the first volume of two that are. I tell you what I call it, you won't buy it. Because it's not a real flattering thing. This is just a picture book. It breaks out by town. There's a little tiny introduction for each town, and then a list of all the factories. You know those series that are for beginners? Books that are for beginners?
Rhinoceros.
I would never say this is called West Virginia Glass for Dummies. But it doesn't have much meat. It's not black and yellow. It does have a beautiful lady with color. Sometime in the next few years, hopefully there'll be the companion volume, which will be all in text, which nobody will read except me and my mother. But I have a few of those with me. I'll hang here. I would love to have questions, because I came late. I'm going to stay at least an extra hour. Everybody needs a lucky question. I thank you for the opportunity, and I can apologize for my tardiness.
Let's give it a round of applause. Hope to see you guys next time. Y'all want coming up on Thursday? Not this Thursday, next.